using something called self-determination theory. This is a very, very long-standing theory in psychology for behavior change. We know that there are three basic psychological needs to help someone stay motivated and feel like they want to do something essentially over and over again forever. And the first one is autonomy. So actually feeling like they're in control of their own decisions and that they are part of that process. And the next one is belongingness. So actually feeling like they belong, whether that's to the community.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Dr. Joey Munoz Show, your go-to podcast for all things health, fitness, and nutrition. I'm your host, Dr. Joey, Nutrition Sciences Ph.D., and founder of Fit4Life Academy. In today's episode, I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Kasey Joe, who has a PhD in psychology and is an expert in the field of behavior change, primarily focusing on how fixed and growth mindsets impact behavior change in relation to nutrition and exercise. Really, really cool stuff. During the episode, we discussed the nuances between fixed and growth mindsets, how to help individuals cultivate a growth mindset, as well as specific coaching strategies to help clients become more self-aware, change their behaviors, and ultimately achieve their health and fitness goals. With that said, let's go ahead and get right into it, and I hope you enjoy today's episode. Kasey, why do you think so many fitness coaches fail at creating lasting behavior change in their clients? Do you think that coaches perhaps focus on the wrong things and maybe blame their clients when they're not the ones to blame?
Short answer, yes, I do. I do think that happens a lot. I think a lot of coaches like to use the term uncoachable or just assume that their clients aren't motivated or they're self-sabotaging. And at that point, that's like a throw my hands up as a coach. I can't do anything about this. But the reality is there's a lot of things you can do for those clients. And I really, really want any coaches listening to remember that the reason someone is coming to you for help is because they're not motivated, because they are getting in their own way, because they can't stick to a plan on their own. So asking for these clients who are already coming to you in these perfect conditions and just like, we'll stick to the plan and stay motivated and all these things. That's not why we're coaches. We're coaches to help people get through those things and work through those things. So I do think a lot of coaches get stuck in a fixed mindset themselves of this perspective that these types of issues, behavior change issues, mindset issues, all or nothing thinking, self-sabotage are not really an issue for the coach to handle. Like, I'm just here for the nutrition and fitness, which is fine if that's what you want to do. But then you are going to run into this exact issue of not being able to help people actually change their behaviors and see results that actually last. So there's a lot of different missteps, and I guess we could call them potentially even mistakes that we could get into as far as what I think are the most common things that I see when it comes to mindset and behavior change and what's really holding coaches back from seeing more success with their clients, if you want to get into those.
Yeah, I'd love to start there. I think it's really helpful to identify perhaps what are some of the mistakes, and then we can address how to actually fix those mistakes and what are some strategies and tools that coaches can use to help their clients succeed. And I want to preface this quickly by saying, for those of you guys listening, if you're not a coach, don't tune out because a lot of these principles obviously apply to people who are trying to accomplish behavior change, improve their nutrition, improve their fitness as well.
Yeah, for yourself, or also if you're a parent with children, like a lot of what we're going to talk about is just how to communicate things differently. And I'm pretty sure if you're a parent with children, you probably also try to elicit some behavior change in them sometimes.
Yeah,
So it can be really helpful for that as well.
I'm
So
taking notes because I have a 2-year-old.
perfect, perfect. Yeah, two birds, one stone type situation here. Okay, so trying to think which one I want to start with. The biggest one, most common one that I see, and one thing to remember too is that these missteps, these mistakes are very normal and very common because coaches aren't taught how to do this stuff. Like, it's really not a cornerstone of any nutrition or fitness type of certification or education. If you're getting anything, it is very minimal. So if you're listening to some of these things and thinking like, oh my God, I'm doing this all the time, like this is so bad, like what the heck? No wonder. Just take a deep breath and understand that where you are is fine, and where you are now, like becoming more aware of what needs to be adjusted, is perfect. That's amazing. So first thing is that a lot of coaches immediately provide solutions to their clients when they're struggling. They immediately jump to wanting to fix things. So if a client is struggling, they can't hit their protein intake, the first thing the coach wants to do is like, okay, I noticed last week you weren't able to hit your protein any days. We're missing it by 20 to 30 grams. Here's this beautiful PDF that I made for you with all of the different protein options and what the like per the gram, per the ounce that you can get from each of these things. Like this is going to be so helpful, and just try to do all of these things because we are trying to help, right? It's really coming from a good place. But the problem is that client maybe already went to Google, maybe already has 16 different PDFs from all over the place, has tried a lot of things, and then now you're just coming at them with another PDF and they're going to lose it, right? And they're going to be really upset because you're supposed to be helping me, you're supposed to be my coach, not just like sending me another PDF. Like that's one option, one direction it could go. Someone else could come back and say, half of the stuff on here has dairy on it, and you know I'm lactose intolerant, so you're not really paying attention. And then now they feel uncared for, that you're not really paying, like they're just one person on your roster of many clients. So that can go a not very good direction either. And just in general, they may feel like, okay, you're just tossing all this information at me, but you don't actually know what's going on. So instead of maybe asking, okay, well, what's kind of going on with the protein thing? I know we didn't quite hit it every day this week. Can you tell me more about that? Simply asking a question first can go so far. And within those conversations too, asking a little bit more about, okay, in the past, I'm looking back a month ago, you had 3 weeks in a row where you hit your protein every single day. What was different on those weeks compared to what happened in the last couple of weeks? Can we see like if there's a pattern here, like what's going on, maybe some like misalignment, and have them kind of help you do the digging to figure out what's going on, because it is so important to try to help the client stay in the driver's seat of these situations and it not just feel like you are prescribing and telling them what to do, even though they may say that's what they want. I promise it is not the best from a behavior change perspective. So that's the biggest one. I like to say something you need to try to do as a coach is just like sit on your hands in those situations before you immediately try to provide solutions, and see what is a question that I could potentially ask here to help guide them to a solution on their own instead of me just immediately providing it for them. So that's a big one there. Before I go on to any other ones, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, no, I love starting there because I guess the whole concept is to really help the client feel empowered, that they can navigate this whole space on their own and they don't need to rely on someone long term, right? It's funny what you mentioned about newer coaches feeling like coaching is about information, because I definitely fell into that category when I started. I remember finishing up my PhD and just thinking, I know so much. I'm going to be able to help all these people. And it's just like coaching is obviously, information is important, but it's not nearly as important as we think it is. First off, like a lot of people already know what healthy eating looks like. They may not know exactly how much protein they need or what the best way to train for muscle growth is, but they know they need to exercise and eat pretty healthy, and for some reason they're struggling, right? And over time, I really realized these things and be like, okay, it's a lot more important to really focus on the mindset related things, like you mentioned, helping clients feel like they're empowered. That is one thing that I've implemented or started to change in terms of the way that I've implemented over the years. Is exactly what you mentioned, like not necessarily providing a solution, but thinking, all right, if you're having this obstacle, how about you come up with a game plan and then we'll go over it together. And then I'll give you my feedback after you put in the work and actually try to come up with something, right? And one thing I always do that you just brought up, and I'm happy that you brought it up, it's something I've just kind of done intuitively, is trying to refer to previous times when they've had more success or less success and comparing, right? Because it's not always just now they're doing worse and before you did better. It sometimes is also like, hey, now you're doing really well and you were struggling with this just 3 weeks ago. Like, what changed? Let's reflect on that, right? So I'm happy you brought that up. But let's go ahead and go on to number 2.
Yeah, no, that's all really good. And one thing I want to point out with that too is that as humans, we have a really hard time recognizing our own strengths and a really hard time at celebrating our own wins a lot of the time. So everyone listening
Yeah.
to this is like, yeah, sounds familiar. So in these situations, what's really, really cool about being a coach and having a coach is that as the coach, you get to help your clients recognize those strengths and recognize those wins and kind of like shine a light on all of that stuff that they maybe would just kind of like glaze over and move on to like, what do I need to improve? What are my weaknesses? What are all the
Mhm.
bad things that I'm doing wrong? Right. So being able to really, the flip side of that, right, is pull out the, oh, look, this went so well. Tell me more about that. Not
Yeah.
just, good job, bring that into next week. Let's keep the momentum going, but really ask them, like, what made the
Yeah.
difference there? Like, what made you able to hit your protein goals this week when it was such a struggle for you the last few weeks? Like, I really want to hear about it. So, there's a big part of cultivating a growth mindset that requires you to be praising effort over ability. So, in these situations, again, very good for parenting too. In these situations, we really want to be asking, tell me a little bit more about the hard work that you did to get here, or what was required of you that you were able to get around in the obstacles that you saw and get around those in order to achieve this thing,
Mhm.
rather than just like, see, I know you could do it. I knew it all along. Like, you got this. That doesn't feel as good as you clearly tried really hard. Now tell me more about it, type of thing. And that is going to be so much more helpful for cultivating a growth mindset versus what can actually happen is you start cultivating a fixed mindset in someone if it's just like, oh, I knew you had it in you all along, or it's just you have that
Yeah.
ability, I knew you could do it. Like, that just kind of makes it seem like it has something to do with them innately and not something that they are able to cultivate on their own and over
Yeah.
time and with effort and the right resources, et cetera, et cetera. So really, really good stuff there. And actually brings me to another point with taking strengths for granted and not recognizing the wins. As a coach, what I see lots of coaches do who come into the certification and work with me is that they do a lot of actually ignoring the bad and only focusing on the good. So it's
Mhm.
sort of like the whole, oh, we'll start over on Monday type of mentality. And coaches make fun of that mentality, but then they do it with their clients all of the time. Like, I know how hard it can be to say no to another drink in those situations. It happens to the best of us. No worries. We'll just like move on to a fresh week. And it's understandable that you didn't get your workouts in given how stressful this last week was, how much you had on your plate. Like, no big deal. Let's just like start fresh this week. We do that a lot. And it's really important to point it out and say, hey, this is what happened in the last week. I'd love to chat with you a little bit about it. Not a big deal. It's
Yeah.
ultimately like a drop in the ocean for where you're going and really changing your lifestyle to be more healthy. But let's not just sweep it under the rug. Let's talk about it. And it can be uncomfortable for the client to have to talk about, their missteps and things like that, or things that didn't go really well. And I think that's why a lot of the times coaches do just ignore it because they're like, I don't want to make them feel bad. But the truth is, spending some time there and explaining to them that the best thing they can do is spend some time here and kind of unpack what happened, and not necessarily coming from a place of like scolding, but coming from a place of, I would really like to better understand as your coach because that will allow me to help you more. And it'll also allow you to start to make some changes that are actually going to make an impact for years and years to come. So, would you be up for it if we spent some time here discussing what happened last week? Whatever they went to a barbecue and overdid
Yeah.
it, drinking, eating, whatever. So that's a big one I see a lot.
Yeah, it can be uncomfortable to talk about those things, definitely.
Hmm.
But the thing is, oftentimes those are recurring behaviors in clients, right? Because truthfully, if it is a client that is on point 90% of the time and they miss their workouts for a week, yeah, like it's not a big deal, right? But the person that is missing their workouts likely isn't missing it just once every 6 months. It's something that's occurring frequently. And it's important to obviously help them to change those behaviors, right? One thing that I like to do with my clients, and I'd love to get your perspective on this, um, when I see that a client is struggling with something frequently, like let's say it's missing a workout because they're stressed with work, but work is stressful really frequently, right? Obviously, I don't have the same skill set and expertise that you do, but one of the things that I like to talk about is whether or not there is alignment between the goals that they say they want to achieve and the lifestyle that they want to live, right? Because I'm a big believer that there are no shoulds, right? Like you don't have to do this. I tell my clients, I'll support whatever it is you want to do, but understand first and foremost that you're the one saying you want to do this. And if you do want to do this and your actions don't align with that, why? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you realize that some of those goals aren't important, because I have had those circumstances before where I've worked with somebody who's already in good shape, they're healthy, and maybe they want to take their physique to the next level, whatever that means. But they don't really understand what's necessary to get there. And, I first start working with them to support them to achieve that goal. And then I notice that they're having difficulty making progress towards that goal. And they start to feel bad about that. And in my head, I'm like, you have nothing to feel bad about. You're already really healthy and in great shape. And we have that conversation. I always bring up this one story of a guy that was in that exact example. And I asked him, I was like, listen, you already eat really healthy. You already train 5 times per week. You're already physically active. You like going out with your family to dinner 2 or 3 times a week and not worrying about what you're eating. And realistically, these are some of the small things that we would have to change if you wanted to lose another 2% body fat. Does that really matter? And they're like, when you put it like that, like, no, it doesn't matter. But I never thought about it that way. But it just helps give clarity, right?
Yeah, no, I really like that. And in general, kind of what you're doing is a exercise, I guess, for lack of a better term, that I do a lot with clients. And I also teach coaches, called playing out the script. So for you, you're saying, okay, so this is where you want to go. Let's really talk about like what all of the other directions, routes to get there, what that would look like, what it's going to feel like, what it's going to change in your day-to-day life in order to get to that place. And for people to really play it out all the way through and really see, they may go, you know, doesn't really sound that great after all. Doesn't really seem like the trade-off is actually worth it. But they don't take the time to do that because we just get so excited about the outcome, right? We're so excited
Yeah.
about having that goal. We can see it, we can visualize it. Like that's amazing. But then actually having to take a step back and go, well, what does that mean for my everyday life for the next 6 months to a
Exactly.
year? And suddenly it's like, no, I don't
Yeah.
actually want to do
Yeah.
that.
I want to define some quick terms before we talk about perhaps other mistakes or tips,
Mhm.
as you've used the term fixed and growth mindset a couple times now in this conversation. What exactly does that mean? Why is it important? And are there any other types of mindsets, for lack of a better term, that are necessary to help a client achieve success?
Yeah, yeah. Good questions. Good questions. So, when we're talking about mindset, and I'm coming from a very scientific background with mindset. So, the research definition of mindset and how it's used, like in the literature, when you see mindsets being talked about, it's essentially the lens that you're taking to see the world through, how you're making sense of things, and how you're assigning meaning to things. It is just this, again, a lens. That's everything is getting filtered through that lens. So when we go kind of like a step down to get a little bit more specific, we can break down that mindset into growth versus fixed mindsets. And we have these two different mindsets of where you could kind of lean towards one or the other. And I'll say something right here because a lot of people talk about I have a fixed mindset or I have a growth mindset or you do or you don't type of thing. And the reality is most people are not 100% fixed or 100% growth in any given area. They just lean towards one or the other. And we see that even when we're measuring it using scales in the research too. So keeping that in mind, like just like with everything, there's a lot of gray area. It's not just over here, and that's it. And also keeping in mind that it is different depending on the domain. So you can have more of a growth mindset when it comes to your career and your ability to get promotions, climb the ladder, what have you. You really believe in your ability to continue to improve and get better there. Or you could also have a fixed mindset when it comes to health and fitness. So you don't actually believe in your ability to lose weight and keep it off. And this could all be living in the same person. The same person could have an entirely different perspective and an entirely different mindset in these two different areas of their life. So that's sort of like a misconception that I see talked about a lot. It's like, oh, you just have a growth mindset or you have a fixed mindset. And the reality is it could look so different depending on the thing that we're talking about in your life. So I kind of said it already, but a growth mindset is really just believing in your ability to change, to improve, to develop a certain ability, trait, characteristic, even. There's a lot of work on your mindset about like personality and how like changeable you actually think that that is, which is like really interesting area to dive into. And then a fixed mindset is just the opposite of that, not thinking you can actually change. And it could be something like Now, a lot of people listening are probably like, oh, no, I have a growth mindset for sure in pretty much all areas of my life, I think. But it can be pretty sneaky and kind of sit in the back of your mind, just kind of whisper to you every once in a while and say, yeah, I don't really know if you're going to be able to do that. I don't know if we can like reach that level of success. Like, don't get too excited because that's probably not going to happen. So that can happen a lot. And then people are wondering why they can't make it to the next level in their business, or they're not able to stick with their health and fitness goals or what have you. And a lot of times, I'm very biased in this area for sure, but a lot of times it does come back down to their mindset and they may not even realize it's happening. So that's kind of like the lay of the land there.
Do you think self-doubt is a natural process or a natural part of doing things that are uncomfortable and changing, though?
Yes, that's a good question. I definitely think so because when something is new and you don't really know how to do everything perfectly, there's going to be a little bit of doubt of your ability to do those things. But I think if you also have the belief in yourself at the same
Yeah.
time that I can learn these things, I can find the resources, I can hire the person to help me, I can figure this
Yeah.
out. Everything is figure outable type of mentality, which
Yeah.
would be honestly more of a growth mindset. Then I think it's the growth mindset can see that self-doubt and go, that's normal. And I'm still going to be able to be successful regardless. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, yeah, how I would fit that into everything.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt this episode, but I just wanted to let you know that I recently partnered with Hungry Root, which is a fantastic meal delivery service. Honestly, I rarely ever partner with companies because I only like to support companies and products that I truly believe in. And unfortunately, in the fitness space, there's a ton of shitty products. But every once in a while, I have the opportunity to partner with amazing companies like Hungry Root. When you go to their website, all you have to do is fill out a quick questionnaire about your dietary preferences to make sure that the food they send you is actually stuff that you like. I always select for the meals to take minimal prep time because I don't want to spend a ton of time cooking. They literally take under 5 minutes. And I choose the high protein option for the gains, of course. What's cool is that they also send you specific recipes to make with the ingredients that they send you to make sure that nothing goes to waste. I really appreciate that because I can't tell you how much stuff we throw out in our house. If you're looking for a convenient, healthy, delicious, and affordable food delivery service, make sure to check out Hungry Root. You will not be disappointed. The link to their site will be down in the description of this episode. And they've been kind enough to support my podcast and give you, the listener, 40% off of your first order by using the code JoeyMunoz40, which will just be automatically put into your cart when you use the specific link that's in the description of this episode. All right, let's go ahead and get back into the podcast. The reason I asked that question is because I'm a big believer of, and I guess part of having a growth mindset is also building confidence, right? And having, even if there's small wins, some proof that you are capable of doing certain things. Because if everything in your life has shown you otherwise, it can be quite difficult to believe in yourself, right? And so for me, in my personal life, like anything, at least based off my experience, anything that I've tried to achieve that feels uncomfortable, there's always a certain degree of self-doubt. But I always believe in taking action, and taking action will then build confidence,
Mhm.
right? Like I don't need to feel confident to do something. I just need to actually do something. Now, it's really hard to get some people to just actually do something, all right?
Mhm.
I think, I don't know much about this. I think it's just a personality trait of mine that's been ingrained in me since I was a kid to just do something about things. That was something my mom like always instilled in me that like, hey, you may not know how to do it, but go figure it out, right? And so that helped me in so many ways. I don't really even know where I'm going with this question, but what are some things that coaches can do specifically to help a client develop a growth mindset, right? If they're in a place where
Mhm.
like, man, I've tried everything. I've never seen progress. I've done the things that my friends do and they get amazing results and I don't. Or anytime I try to do something, something sabotages me, right? Somebody who's in that place, what sort of things can you do with them to help them change?
Yeah, good question. And a lot of what you said, I'm like, oh, mindset concept here, psychological underpinning here. I'm like, oh, mom did something right with you. No, but and so I think with coaches, and you're thinking like, okay, I'm hearing a lot of this stuff. I'm hearing my clients say like clearly these like fixed mindset statements, like I'm just not the type of person to be doing this. I can never do that. I've always done this, da da da. Like I'm very much stuck in this spot. And you as the coach, you're seeing this and you're thinking to yourself, like, what do I do with this? You know, how do I even respond to these people? Just say, no, you're good. Like we got this. And that's just, and that's toxic cheerleader vibes are probably like
Yeah.
not going to do it. That toxic positivity rather. So I think the first thing you need to do is try to help your clients become more aware of where their fixed mindset is showing up. And the best practice is likely not to just tell them because most of the time if you go to someone and say, "Hey, it sounds like you have a fixed mindset. You just said this and that makes it so," they're not going to respond very well, especially when we're calling out someone's fixed mindset because when people have a fixed mindset is because they believe there's something about them that is unchangeable. So if you go and say you have a fixed mindset and you're the one that's holding yourself back by thinking that way, it's less for them about, oh, I just need to think differently and we'll be good to go. They're not in that space. They
Yeah.
instead may see that as like a personal attack and like, oh, well, I'm just not good enough then because this is just who I am. I can't change it. So if you're telling me this is the issue, then like I'm screwed because this is just the way it has to be for me. So definitely do not just go to someone and say like, okay, you have a fixed mindset. We need to work on that. There may be some, relationships you have with clients. You can be like a
Yeah.
little bit sarcastic and like banter back and forth and it might work, but
Yeah.
I would caution with that one. But how then do we help someone start to recognize where their fixed mindset shows up if we can't necessarily tell them? So it's important for you as the coach to kind of have that radar of where is the fixed mindset showing up, where is the growth mindset showing up, so that you can also maybe try to tease that out and encourage that a little bit more. And you can also ask questions around how do you feel like the way you're thinking about this situation actually impacts things, and just kind of try to ask some
Mm.
questions around that. And they may come back and be like, what are you saying? Think about what I'm thinking about. Like what what is going on here? It's funny because when I
Inception.
have yeah, right. I have students who leave my certification program and then they go back and start coaching the same clients that they were working with prior to doing the program. And their clients will come back and be like, where are these questions coming from? Like, who are you? I know you took this program, but like you're acting so different. And it's just because they're asking these different questions and the
Yeah. Yeah.
clients
Yeah.
are not used to it. But anyway, you can ask some questions around that and just see what they come up with and see what they see, because a lot of times people will come back to you, your clients will come back to you and say, yeah, you're right. Like I am thinking quite negatively about this, or yeah, I suppose if I do think about it in situations where I am successful, I have more of a positive mindset, positive perspective. That's like what people usually use because they're not familiar with like growth versus fixed. So just getting them started in those conversations with some questions can be really good. And then you can kind of like guide it down that direction. And you can
Yeah.
even get to the point too where you can ask permission and say, I went through this health mindset coaching certification program and I learned a lot about the science of mindset and behavior change. If you're up for it, I'd love to send some questions your way or like dig a little bit deeper into something, because I think I see a pattern here that if we could resolve it, could make a world of the difference for you. Are you
Yeah.
down for that? So you're getting their buy-in first so they're not feeling maybe so personally attacked if they do feel attacked or feel like they have to get defensive in these situations. They've already agreed. So at this point, it's kind of
Yeah.
like on them. So that's a good direction to take it. But I do think one thing, kind of just like backing it up for coaches who don't have a lot of training in mindset and behavior change and psychology with their clients, is to pay attention to those words. Like I said at the beginning, like when a client is coming in saying like, "Ugh, it's just nothing ever works for me," or "I've tried this before and it'll never ever work," or "I just really don't think I'm the type of person to track macros. Like I don't think I am that." And that might be true, right? But we also want to go a little bit deeper and go
Yeah.
another layer underneath here and try to figure out why they believe that. Because like you were saying before, Joey, that people have reasons for feeling this way. So we
Mhm.
can't just go to them and say like, no, the way you're thinking, your belief systems are irrelevant.
Yeah.
It's there for a reason. So if someone's thinking like I'm not an exerciser, there's a reason for that. So asking a little bit more about, can you remember a certain time or a situation or maybe a person that caused you to have this belief? And they usually have stories, oh, I've tried this thing, I've tried that thing. And then I had my mom who told me I was a super slow runner when I was younger. And you're getting all of these stories. And then there's actually this is a very like tangible exercise that coaches can do with their clients. And this comes from cognitive behavioral therapy. So asking a little bit more about the evidence for that thought or that belief. So you can go to the client and say, what's the evidence for it? In this case, oh, my mom told me this, or I've tried all these other exercise type programs. Nothing ever works. Like I can't stick to anything. So I'm just not an exerciser, right? Okay, cool. Let's validate that. Makes a lot of sense that you'd be feeling this way after decades potentially of these stories and being told certain things from other people. That said, tell me a little bit about some evidence that is not in support of that belief or that thought. So then they can sit and think like, okay, well, evidence against that belief or thought would be that right now I'm working with a health and fitness coach. I've never worked with a one-on-one coach before, so I can't necessarily compare now to previously. I also just have more resources at my disposal than I did when I was younger. And I feel like I've come into like who I am as a person a little bit more. Maybe that would make a difference. I have a really supportive husband now. I didn't used to have like a supportive significant other, so that could help. So they start to just like build this case for why changing is actually possible. And that is really, really powerful. And what often happens is that there is more evidence against that thought or belief than there is evidence for it. So that list is a lot longer too, which is great to see. So then as the coach, you can kind of guide them to the next part of this and asking them to really reveal the most accurate, most realistic depiction of this thought, of this belief that they're having. So this client might say, I've had a lot of failures in the past and a lot of things have not worked for me, but it's not fair to compare apples to oranges in this situation because I'm in a totally different situation now. I'm doing something totally different that is unlike anything I've done before. So there is still a chance that I can be successful with this and I can really see myself as an exerciser. So they'll work through that and say that, and you can talk a little bit more like, okay, how does that feel now that you've got to that place and you've been able to recognize that? Because so much of the time, it's just we get into this place of having these negative thoughts, these negative beliefs, and we just let them run rampant. And then they just turn into like a bunch of other little gremlin thoughts that we didn't want there in the first place. And a lot of times they don't even make sense anymore. Like it's really
Yeah.
not based in reality anymore. So if we can walk through this process of getting back to like what is actually real, that can feel so much better, not because that feels better than I can't be an exerciser. It feels better than I have a chance. Of course, that feels better, but it also feels better because it's reality. It's not just something made up that has, again, just like spiraled into something worse than it needs to be. So then from there, it can kind of have the conversation of like, what are the actions we want to take next then? And then as that becomes a ongoing collaborative relationship, right? So I feel like I just said 9 million words. So hopefully that was helpful.
You just hinted at the next question that I was thinking of. Like,
Perfect.
that seems to be like the first place we need to get our clients to a place where they can acknowledge that they're able to make change, right? Because if they can't acknowledge that they're able to make change or truly believe that they can make change, nothing else really seems to matter, right? Now, let's say we're able to have these conversations, we're able to dig a little bit deeper, ask the right questions, help the client visualize what success looks like and understand that they have maybe not at the moment the skills necessary to get there, but they can develop those skills. What's the next step? How do you help a client develop an actual action plan? As I'm assuming, like you mentioned earlier, you wouldn't just tell them exactly what to do. So to set them up for success in their journey, what do you think would be the next step?
Yeah, so definitely want to keep autonomy at the forefront. And I can actually like give a little bit of theoretical basis for this
Sure.
too. So, using something called self-determination theory, this is a very, very long-standing theory in psychology for behavior change. We know that there are 3 basic psychological needs to help someone stay motivated and feel like they want to do something essentially over and over again forever. And the first one is autonomy. So actually feeling like they're in control of their own decisions and that they are part of that process, which again is funny because then we hear people all the time like, I just need someone to tell me what to do. And it's like, but no, you don't. Like, you really don't. It
You
just
already
feels
know
that
what to
way.
do.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And the next one is belongingness. So actually feeling like they belong, whether that's to the community. I know I hear people all the time, they go into the gym and I don't feel like I belong there. So the chances of them wanting to go back because they don't feel like they're
Yeah.
part of again, just like not the type of person to be at the gym, it's very low for them to keep up with it. Right. And then it's ABC. So A for autonomy, B for belongingness, and C for competence. So that's the third basic psychological need. So you want to actually feel like you are capable of implementing these actions, doing these behaviors, and that you're actually learning along the way or becoming more competent in this area. So when I go to coaches and people are in this position of like, okay, how do I actually help people start making these changes? Making sure those three things are at like the top, it's the header of your life all the time as the coach. Like you're always coming back to that, like what are we doing that is going to support those things? Because then at that point, you can swap in and out all different kinds of strategies and ideas, but as long as you're helping support those three things, it's a pretty solid fail safe in
Yeah.
general. So when you're thinking about it, obviously this is also an opportunity. This is the autonomy part too, and competence and belongingness. It all kind of comes together here. Is just keeping it very collaborative with the client. I could say this over and over again, but it is so important. So going to them and saying like, okay, what is the thing that you want to focus on first? And how have you tried to do that or implement that in the past? What worked well, what didn't, like really getting all that information from them. Because as the coach, you have to remember you are the expert on nutrition, exercise, whatever your expertise is. You are not the expert on your client's life. They are. So you have to stay in that perspective of they have so much information that I need to extract from them in order to be the best coach for them. And you should tell your clients that too, that like ultimately, I don't know your life. I don't know exactly what's going to work well for you. So that is why I need you. And that is why this is going to be a collaborative relationship. And I'm not just going to tell you what to do all of the time because that's not going to work. So
Yeah.
that's where I would kind of start. Again, that's kind of like a vague way of putting it, but I think as long as you can stick to the ABCs, that's going to be really helpful and you keep it really collaborative and going back and forth. And if things don't work, like set that expectation that if, hey, this doesn't end up working, no big deal, then we just adjust. And the expectation setting is a really, really big part of all of this
Yeah.
too. So yeah.
Yeah. You just brought something up. Hold up. I'm going to write the word expectations here down so I don't forget something. You brought up something that just made me realize something that I can improve in my own coaching process. So I tend to be pretty collaborative with my clients in the sense of like, hey, if we're modifying your training plan, what exercises would you like to do because you enjoy them? What would you not like to do from the nutritional perspective, right? To get their perspective so that they,
Yep.
one, have input, but two, I make sure that I'm taking into account the things that they enjoy. A place where I do that poorly is developing our initial plan, right? So I tend to take a client's intake form and develop a plan, and we have a conversation about it. But it's very much me saying like, hey, this is what I've developed for you based off the information that you provided. And even one thing that I'm thinking about is I tend to take a very habit-focused approach to nutrition rather than like saying like, these are your macros and that's it.
Right.
Identifying a list of behaviors that they would benefit from based off of what they've shared with me. And usually I categorize those in terms of highest to least importance and saying, we're going to start here. Does that sound good? I didn't even think about like, hey, out of these habits, what sounds like something you want to work on? That would be a nice, fun way also to get their input on those things. I'm happy you shared those. I have a couple questions here I want to ask, but I have one interesting question that I've experienced a couple times. I feel like, yes, obviously as coaches, we can do a lot to improve our service and really do a better job at helping our clients. But there are some people that are so difficult to get information out of them. Or it seems like they just really don't prioritize this thing at all, right? I've had circumstances where I try to pry more information out of my clients, or I'm like, hey, I need you to follow up with me on this. Like, I really want you to reflect on this thing that's going well or not going well. And it's crickets. What do you recommend in those situations? Or is there anything you can even do in those situations?
Yeah. This is a question I get a lot. You're probably not surprised.
Yeah.
So this is gonna happen. And like I love that you're asking this question. I'm not surprised that you're asking this question rather than just being like, okay, there's always gonna be those 10% of people that I just absolutely can't do anything with, and that these people fall in those categories, right? So instead, what you can do a few different things. So first of all, speaking of expectation setting, if you're not having a very strong expectation setting conversation at the forefront of a
Mhm.
coaching relationship, you really, really need to be. At KJO Coaching, that's my health and fitness coaching company that I own, we have inside our intake form an entire expectation agreement. It takes up like half of a page, and it is just one statement after the other, certain things like, okay, shit's gonna hit the fan at some point. I'm still expecting you to check in with me during those weeks
Yes.
when you are really busy, things don't go to plan at all, you totally fall off the wagon, whatever phrase is fitting here for you. I'm still expecting you to communicate with me. They have to literally initial after every single one of these statements. And they're all like variations of that. And then during our intake call with that new client, we'll go over it again and say, right now, you're really excited. You're really hopeful. I'm super stoked. This is going to be such a fun time. And we're going to really get to know each other and have a great relationship. It's all going to be great. But you're going to have weeks where you hate me, and you're going to have weeks where you hate yourself. And there's going to be times when things are not sunshine and rainbows like they are right now. So when those times come up, can I count on you to still at least communicate with me? Even if you're not completing your check-in to the fullest, can I still count on you being there, upholding that other end of the relationship and getting like a verbal response from them
Mhm.
too? So that can go a really long way, because as humans, ultimately, we like to be consistent. We don't like
Yeah.
to say, I'm doing this one thing. Yes, I get you. Yes, I'm there 100%. And then 3 months down the line, not do those things.
Yeah.
Like, people will remember. And when you have a like in writing thing too, it's really great, because then, not to be like rude about it, but we can screenshot that and send it to them and go, hey, I know we agreed to these terms. Like, is there anything you feel like you need to update? And just give it to them, open up the conversation that way. So that's one thing that I think is very, very important to do in general. And you could always, have like that at the halfway point, have another conversation around those things if you feel like they're not really sitting the same way that they did at the beginning or whatever. But another thing that I like to do, and I feel like sometimes, especially in the online coaching space, coaches forget that you can pick up the phone too and just call your clients. And sometimes it can be, instead of responding to your check in this week, do you have just 10 to 15 minutes to chat really quick on the phone? I have some ideas for you. And just keep it vague and get them on the phone so you can actually have a conversation. And you can get maybe some of that information that you're not able to get to them through your check in form or what have you. We can also reset those expectations once they're on the other side of the phone. And things just go a lot differently when you're actually having a back and forth conversation versus the virtual world that we live in.
Yeah.
And the final little strategy that I like to, especially with clients that you feel like this is going on week after week and you're just like, it's pulling teeth to get more information, instead of what we normally do, because we do like to have our client check in and then move on to the next person and kind of like wrap up one to move on to the other, is instead go to the client and say, hey, before I deliver you your nutrition updates, the updates to your workout plan, your next like training block, whatever it may be, before I send any of that over, I have a couple really, really important questions I need you to answer. Once you answer those, then we can move on to the rest of the
I
check in.
like
So
that.
you're almost like withholding the stuff that they
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
want, and I want to know what my new training plan is, or I want to know what the updates are to my nutrition and see what Joey has to say about my progress. Like, but you're like, I just answer these two questions. That's it. And that's like sort of their ticket to get into the
Yeah.
rest of it. And I like that too, not from like a malicious place, but because it really showcases how important those questions are and how important that stuff is in their plan. Cause they're like, oh my God, he's not even willing to give me anything until I answer these damn questions. Like,
Yeah.
okay. So it really like hits them differently in that way too. And especially if you haven't done that with a client before, they're going to be like, where is this coming from? Like, geez. So
Yeah.
it can kind of like just like be a pattern interrupt in that way.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I've never even thought about that before, but it's a cool idea because oftentimes the feedback is really necessary for whatever modifications you're going to make, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes it's like really difficult to get that feedback. Um, yeah, you're giving me a ton of great ideas because, I tend to do check-ins, I communicate with my clients, and sometimes towards the end, here's another thing in terms of like prioritizing the things that are important, maybe putting them at the beginning of a check-in versus at the end, right? Saying, hey, I
Hmm.
need you to follow up with me on XYZ. This information is important. But then you don't hear from them, right? And you may ask
Yeah.
that 2 or 3 times, and it kind of falls on deaf ears sometimes. But I really like that perspective. One thing that I've started doing even more, talking about setting expectations that I used to not do before, is setting expectations even before the coaching process begins to
Mhm.
see if the person's a good fit in the first place, right? Because a person may be a good fit based off of the type of person you work with and whatever their goals are, that it might be right up your alley, but it might not be a perfect fit if they're not ready to commit to the work that needs to be done, right? And so now when I do a sales call with a potential client, typically towards the end when they're like, all right, let me know what's next, I'm ready to go, I'm usually like, all right, before we move forward, like, can you commit to XYZ? I'm not going to tell you this is easy. It's going to require work. It's going to require effort. I'm obviously in your corner to help you every step of the way. But can you commit extra time to this, right? Can this be a priority? Because if you work 12 hours a day and you have a family and you're telling me it's really hard to make any space and time for any of this stuff, like, is it really a priority? And are you going to have any success with it? Which can be some difficult questions to answer, but it's, I think, really helped clients that I start with understand that it's not easy, first and foremost. And two, it
Mhm.
is going to take work, right? So setting those expectations even before getting started, I think, is a good idea too. One thing I wanted to ask is, what role does goal setting play when it comes to helping shift somebody's mindset? Right. And the reason why I asked earlier regarding mindsets is, listen, I don't know anything like the same way that you do about mindset, right? But things that I like to tell my clients are like, we obviously need to have a growth mindset in terms of embracing challenges and understanding that you're willing to change. I don't know if this is even a term or something I made up, but I use the term a process oriented mindset, which
Uh,
is focusing on the process rather than the outcome, right? Like, measure your success by your adherence to the things you said you would do rather than just your proximity to whatever extraneous variable. And the reason why I asked this about goal setting is because I feel like sometimes people set themselves up for failure because of the goals that they set for themselves, right? I'm sure you've seen this too. Like, somebody, comes in and it's like, all right, what are you struggling with? What are your goals? Well, every time I've tried to lose weight, in the past 6 months, I've been trying to lose weight and I haven't lost any weight. Okay, let's talk about what losing no weight means. Like, have you literally not lost any weight? And like, well, no, I've lost 10 pounds, but it's been 6 months. And like, all right, well, what were you expecting to do? And they're like, I thought I would have lost like 50 pounds by now. And it's almost like they're setting themselves up for failure, right?
yeah.
So, how do you incorporate goal setting into a client's success path?
Yeah, yeah. So goal setting is important because we need to be aware of the direction that we're trying to go.
Mhm.
And I really do like what you said about the focus. Did you say process mindset? So
Mhm.
there is actually, when we're looking at growth versus fixed mindset, a growth mindset is usually seen as a like mastery oriented approach to goals. So I'm really just looking to get better at these skills and these behaviors. And then like suddenly voila, like you have a
Goal
healthy,
happens.
fit like situation, right? When you're just focusing on getting better at all of these things, these habits, these behaviors. So that's a more like growth oriented approach to the
Mm.
process of goals, I guess. And on a fixed mindset side, you'll see people talk a lot about performance focus. So really you're just trying to show and performance in the way of like I'm performing, like I'm just like looking like I'm doing the thing. I care more about how other people perceive me and how I look like I'm working towards this thing and if I'm actually look like I'm making progress rather than actually caring about mastering the skills and the strategy and the habits that are required to get there. So it's almost that is more of like that outcome. Like I just want to make it look like I'm getting there. I could care less about the actual mastery of the skills. So that's when we're talking about growth versus fixed mindset. That's the direction that's usually being taken. And I know you asked about different types of mindsets. And for the most part, like people talk about like victim mindset, things like all different types of things,
Yeah.
right? I think that they can probably be categorized under
Yeah.
growth versus fixed when you think about it. So anyway, I
Yeah.
digress. So getting into the goal setting thing, setting a goal is important insofar that we need to have direction. If we
Yeah.
don't know what we're working towards, then what are we even doing here? And I think your example of well, I lost 10 pounds and like, isn't that, that's not good and I need to be here or whatever. It's also, yes, setting expectations and potentially working with someone who can help you set realistic expectations in those ways. But at the same time too, I think it's a lot more about having that direction and working backwards from that outcome and then setting some sub goals along the way. We actually have some really interesting research about, I say sub goals, those are kind of like smaller goals that you set on the way to the long-term goal. There's some interesting research because there's some papers out there talking about how you should focus on that long-term goal all the time, that 50-pound weight loss all the time. Keep that at the top of your head always and forever. Put it on sticky notes, make it your phone background, that whole thing. And then there's other studies that show us that no, we shouldn't be doing that because that feels too daunting. That feels too far away. If you're making a little bit of progress, it's going to feel like nothing and you're not going to stay motivated long term. So it becomes, well, what's right here if we're seeing it be showcased in two different ways through the research. We have evidence going both directions. So another researcher came in and saw this and goes, okay, let's figure out what's going on here. And the reality is the timing matters the most. So if you have like in 6 months, I want to lose 50 pounds using this example, then at the beginning, first, I don't know, call it, and just this is arbitrary numbers. At the first month, second month, third month, fourth month, maybe you should be focusing on smaller goals, maybe losing X amount of weight per month, or just again, like mastering some of the skills that are required and focusing on those tinier goals, not just that 50 pounds, 50 pounds, 50 pounds at the beginning. And then as you get closer to the end of that 6-month mark or get closer to seeing that 50-pound weight loss goal, then shifting your perspective and shifting your focus to that long-term outcome goal is more motivating, is more beneficial. So sort of like when you can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel, then you can start focusing on it. But prior to that, if you're in the dark, don't be looking for the light. Focus on anything else that's around you that can be helpful to you. So that's kind of the interesting research that has come out on the difference between, setting these small goals, getting small wins along the way versus focusing on this long-term goal. So some research to bring into the goal setting conversation for sure and thinking about that. I know you're probably familiar with the SMART goal framework. So I have kind of like my own version of it, and it's the smarter goal framework. And I do like some aspects of the original framework. I think see if I can remember all of these letters now.
Specific.
Yes, S is specific, M is measurable. Both of those I love, especially from what we see in the research. Some of the biggest reasons someone may be successful to a goal is because they're self-monitoring their progress on the way to that goal. So kind of what you were saying before is like, okay, well, how much do you even know how much weight you've lost? Like, are you even paying attention to it? And a lot of times, again, we're just going to gloss over the progress that we are making because we're not paying attention to it. And if you're not monitoring it, then what are you going to do? Like, you can't improve what you can't measure. So, and that becomes tricky too, because people who have a fixed mindset are going to be less likely to want to self-monitor anything because they don't want proof that they're not making progress. They don't want proof that they're failing, but then they're also depriving themselves of proof that they're progressing. So really, really important. And then attainable and realistic are the next two from the SMART goal framework, which I don't love because number one, aren't they the same thing? Like attainable and realistic, both are just like kind of redundant. And we actually have, especially this is mainly speaking from like health and fitness perspective, we have research to support the fact that setting unrealistic weight loss goals is actually not a bad thing. Like it doesn't actually slow down your ability to be successful and maintain your weight loss. Like that is not a variable that we actually care a lot about. So people who are setting maybe unrealistic goals, it's kind of like the shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars type of situation. Like that's what we see more than anything. So the idea of keeping it attainable and realistic, like I don't think, not to use like a really extreme example here, but I don't think Michael Jordan or Steve Jobs were like, what's most attainable and realistic for us to achieve? So when you think about that, okay, so what else could we swap in there? And I like to talk about additive instead of attainable. So what can we put into your life that's adding to your life in some way that's also moving you towards your goals? That is something that is very research supportive as well, that the more we feel like we're adding something in versus taking something away, the better. So like how could you reframe the actions, the behaviors, the things that you're doing to feel more additive? And then let me think. Instead of realistic, I have reverse engineer. So working from the outcome goal and backwards, and that's where the sub goals and things like that would come into play. And then I add an E and the R at the end for smarter instead of smart. And E is for efficacy. Self-efficacy is literally number one thing we need in order to be successful in goal pursuit. And it's this idea that you feel like you can continue to work towards your goals in the face of obstacles and setbacks and what have you. So obviously having a growth mindset can help with that. Having a growth mindset can boost your self-efficacy, which can lead you to be more likely to be successful. So if we're setting up a goal, we really need to think about those obstacles, and we need to think about the impending issues that are going to happen, rather than just pretending like everything's going to be easy and we can just, again, focus on that long-term goal. And then the other are, I'm not going to be able to remember it.
It's okay.
Man, I'll just, leave you hanging with that one. You'll have to come find out.
No, that's a great. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. I just recorded a solo episode for my own podcast on this. So there will be an episode out on the smarter versus smart goal framework. So if you guys are dying to know what that last R is, because I'm not going to be, I can't actually believe that I did all of that just now. It's a lot of S's and M's and R's and T's.
Listen, it's so funny how easy it is to forget things that you know like the back of your hand.
I made this framework and I can't remember it. So.
Yeah. No, it's all good. I really like that. Usually I tell clients to set goals using the SMART framework and then come up with 3. I guess the term I use is smaller goals, but they're not even goals. They're things that you need to do to help you move towards that goal, right? So like, hey, if you want to lose 10 pounds, well, what are 3 things we need to start doing that are realistic for you to actually make progress towards that, right? Maybe it's, okay, maybe I should have a daily step goal, and maybe I should, right? Like, what are the actual actions? And then I always keep the main goal, like that is the North Star, but we're measuring our success based off your ability to adhere to these things that we said we're going to adhere to, right? Because the truth is that most people in the fitness space set goals around weight, and we know the nature of weight fluctuations. You're going to wake up heavier, you're going to wake up lighter. It happens, right? And we can't be so fixated on that. And it's a hard concept to grasp when your whole life you've just been focusing on weight. Talking about weight, I wanted to relate this to another question about enjoyability, because what you mentioned about like focusing on really large goals or not focusing on large goals, I think there's probably an aspect of personality in there as well, right? Because I'm sure some people do better with pursuing really large goals, where some people, not that they don't do well with that, but some people really feel let down or disappointed when they aren't making progress at a certain rate, right? And obviously that comes down to mindset, at least an aspect of it does. But one thing I wanted to mention is how important is enjoyability in this whole thing, and how can we cultivate enjoyability? And I bring this up because we were talking about weight. A good friend of mine, his name is David Roden. I did a podcast episode with him. He's lost over 200 pounds. Not like lost, gain. He lost 200 pounds. Yep. And he's maintained his weight loss for over a decade now. Wow. And in the podcast, what I asked him, I was like, dude, like, what was, if you were to say the thing that helped you the most? And for him, he's a very, very like positive, super cheery person. All of a sudden, he was like, man, I know for some people, like being tough on yourself and, that helps. But for me, it was the complete opposite. The thing he said that helped him the most was celebrating every single small little win, like if it was a massive win. And I thought he was exaggerating. He was in college during the time, and he was like, dude, I would go to the food hall, eat a healthy meal, stand up and give myself a high five for eating a healthy meal. And he was like, every time I lost 5 pounds, I would celebrate like big time. And he's like, that just helped me build so much momentum. And I was like, that's fucking awesome. But this is where it's difficult when you don't have an educational background on this to know like what is the right approach for a person. Should they pursue a larger goal, or should we break it down to smaller, more achievable things, right? And helping them win along the way. Regardless of the approach, I think enjoying the process is really important, right? So what are some strategies we can help or we can implement to help people enjoy things more? I think this probably also comes into like, what are the motivating factors, right? Extrinsic versus intrinsic. How can we get somebody to go from being extrinsic
I know.
Mouthful. Extrinsically motivated to more intrinsically motivated. And I'll leave it at that because I can't speak.
I know. And why can't we just call it internal and external? Like, why do we have to
Yeah,
like make it some fancy research term? But it's funny that you brought that full circle because I immediately, that's where my head went to, was extrinsic versus intrinsic when you said enjoyability. And I literally was like, I had my line prepared. It's like, you say enjoyability, I say intrinsic motivation because
you
that's what
do
it
it.
is. Yes. It's the most pure form of intrinsic motivation is to do something because you actually enjoy doing it.
Yeah.
And there is a whole spectrum, just like with everything, between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. There's other types of motivation that kind of like fall in the in between land. And as you are working towards more self determined, more autonomous actions, you're getting closer and closer to intrinsically motivating factors. So we're really just always trying to get closer and closer. You don't have to like absolutely enjoy everything that you do in order to be motivated to do it. Like, and I think even people like you would probably understand this too, Joey. Like, I'm not always really stoked to go to the gym and like go train legs and like
Yeah.
it's gonna be so hard, or like not every rep is like enjoyable. It actually really
Yeah.
isn't. So understanding that that's the case too, but ultimately we're still going because we enjoy the process, we enjoy all the different aspects of it as a whole, right? So yes, the goal is to kind of continue to uncover more of that intrinsic motivation or move from extrinsically motivating factors to more intrinsically motivating factors. And it really just comes down to, again, the more self determined and the more autonomous you feel in those actions. As you're getting closer to intrinsic, there's also aspects of like, I'm doing this because it's in alignment with some of the values that I have. Like I want a happy, healthy family and I value that. So I'm going to go to the gym because like that is in alignment with that value. It could also be identity. Like I kind of the opposite of what we were talking about before. I identify as an exerciser. I
Mhm.
identify as a healthy, fit individual. So like that's what's motivating me to get to the gym. So those factors all come into play. And so it kind of becomes, as the coach, or if you're doing this for yourself too, to really start to think like, what are my values? What do I identify as? What do I enjoy? And like really start to see how those pieces match up with your health and fitness behaviors. And if you're noticing, wow, I don't have a lot of values or identifying factors or enjoyability that
Yeah.
comes from or comes with exercise or healthy eating, like there's your big issue. Like that is like such a glaring thing that you need to focus on. So then it becomes, okay, do you need to do a different type of exercise? And sometimes it might just be like there's a couple exercises in this strength training program that I absolutely freaking hate and that keeps me
Yeah.
from wanting to go to the gym. Then get rid of them, switch them out for something else. There's a lot of other ways to stay moving, and I know we're talking a lot about like strength training and stuff because that's the background that we come from, but there's a lot of other ways to exercise too. It doesn't have to be that, as
Yeah.
much as like strength training is obviously really 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 good for you in a lot of ways and I would
Yeah.
love for you to do it, but let's see really how do we get you moving in a way that you enjoy it or in a way that feels more in alignment with who you are and what you value. But I think so many people too, like if I said, okay, tell me who you are, tell me your identity, some people would not be able to answer that super easily. Or tell me the things that you really really value in your life.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of people can't do that. So taking some time to do that first and then see where the misalignment is with the health and fitness behaviors that you're working towards and see if you can get them a little bit closer.
Yeah. Yeah. Building that enjoyability piece is difficult. Um, I share this with my clients all the time too. It's funny. I hate the bros on Instagram. They're like, just be motivated, just be committed. It's
Oh
like, dude,
God.
shut up. Just shut up. Like I hate
It's
that stuff so much.
discipline over
But
motivation.
yeah. But
Yeah.
aside from that, I openly share with my clients that like I'm fortunate that I saw fitness as part of my lifestyle since I was a kid because both of my parents went to the gym. My mom always really cared about eating really healthy. And although she instilled some dietary practices in me when I was younger that definitely weren't healthy in terms of like relationship with food, regardless, her intent was good. And I saw the importance of living a healthy lifestyle since I was a kid. So I've always been into exercising. I've always played sports. I've always challenged myself physically. I love it. Right. And I tell my clients, I'm like, if I never had the opportunity to change my body composition, even an ounce, I would still go to the gym 4 or 5 times a week maybe I wouldn't train as hard, but I would still go, right? And I say that almost jokingly because truthfully, you know how it is when you've been training for a long time. My body composition hasn't really changed much in the past probably 5 or 6 years, right? Because I've been training for over a decade consistently now. And so I'm happy and fortunate that I had that experience, but I know that so many people don't. And I don't have a process to help my clients go from not enjoying things to enjoying them more versus asking them like, what do you like? And incorporating some of those things. But I mean, enjoy in terms of like living a healthy lifestyle overall. It's more
Mm-hmm.
encompassing than just the exercises that you do, right? Um, the same way that I would have a process to like help them develop healthy habits around nutrition, right? It's maybe a little bit more linear with some of those things because it's more tangible. But one
Mm-hmm.
thing that I have found to be incredibly helpful, that is something I'm incorporating in my own coaching business more and more, is the importance of community and group discussions, right? This is when we were talking about before the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
why we launched our membership thing. It's like, man, I have literally had people, we've only had it for 3 months now. People tell me like, I was trying to do all this stuff for so long before joining. And like, I know I have to do these things and I wasn't doing them. And just like having the community and seeing people post every day has helped me shift my identity. Or like just coming to coaching calls and hear that that person is struggling with something similar and just hearing what they're going through has helped me. And more and more, I try to put more emphasis on the community piece. Because what I realize is that a lot of people who struggle with their health and fitness don't have that environment in real life. Because if they did,
Mm-hmm.
they probably wouldn't be struggling with their health and fitness, right? If their spouse cared about their health and fitness or their friends all went to the gym, like they would probably just do those things. But they don't have that in real life. And the community piece is so, so important. Do you have any science to back that up? I'd love to get your perspective.
Yeah. Oh my God. Social support. Are you kidding
Yeah.
me? So important. The whole, what is that phrase? You like a combination of the top five people you spend the most time with type of thing.
Yeah.
Like it definitely, there's some research basis to
Yeah.
that. The people that you spend all of your time with, you're having like conversations with, and it's also like from a mindset perspective too. You better hope those people have a growth mindset in a lot of areas. Otherwise, you're going to very quickly find yourself in a fixed mindset place too, where you're bringing up like, oh, like I'm really having a hard time going to the gym, and they just like, well, screw it, don't go. Like, who needs to go?
Yeah.
Like, whatever, you can go tomorrow. You don't need that kind of motivation in your life. But so it is extremely important. We see, I mean, there are countless studies showcasing how important the people are in your life to your health and fitness goals. And I actually like knowing this, having been in the psychological field going into my PhD program. I was moving from Minnesota to North Carolina to do my
I saw
PhD at
you
NC
posted
State.
about this. Yeah.
Yes. So I just did a podcast episode on this too. And I was really intentional at that point because I had very similar to where a lot of our clients go through have sort of like this awakening period of like, okay, I really want to start focusing on this stuff. I want to change my lifestyle. I'm excited about it, but you're surrounded by a bunch of people who aren't doing that at all. And you can't expect them to change just because you want to change. I know that sucks, but like that's the reality. So it doesn't mean like go get rid of them and find an entirely new friend group, but like maybe find some more people that you can lean
Yeah.
on in those situations. And so this story, I was leaving Minnesota, so I literally could like those people are still my friends, but I could go find a group of people who focused on health and fitness in some way, like really cared about taking care of themselves, and I could have gym partners and we could
Mhm.
like we would, oh my God, we would have like salad parties on Friday nights. Like we would have a grill out and everyone would bring different aspects of like a salad and make our like literally like like silly healthy people stuff. I
That's
could never
taking
do that.
a little too far, Casey.
The salad party's too far.
I'm all about a healthy lifestyle, but a salad party, I mean,
But like I could have never imagined having that with my friends back
yeah.
home. But I was so on it. Like I was, okay, this is the gym I'm probably gonna go to. I'm watching their Instagram stories, like trying to look at the girls who are working out there, looking at their profiles. Oh my gosh, I feel like I could be friends with her. Gonna send her a DM. Like I was that girl. Like, hey, I'm
Yeah.
moving there in a few months. You're working out at the gym that I think I'm gonna go to. Like, would love to connect for coffee or something like that. That's actually how I found my roommate that I was moving in with in
Cool.
North Carolina. So, and that kind of just snowballed into we called ourselves the Fit Fam and everything. Like I had that community that I did not have before. So for anyone listening, going like, I don't have people. It's so hard to meet people. Like you literally can do it. You just need to be that like weirdo in
Yeah.
someone else's DMs, unfortunately.
Yeah. No, I love that story. That's a great story. I jokingly, with the whole thing that I was talking about community in the back of my head, I'm like, this is actually making my job a lot easier because people are coaching themselves.
Totally. And they're supporting themselves instead of like coming to you for everything. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Awesome, Kasey. Well, I appreciate your time a ton today. Was there anything else you wanted to chat about? I feel like we've covered a ton of ground today.
Yeah, I don't think so. Nothing that feels like a gaping hole or
Yeah.
anything. Yeah.
Would you mind sharing, and as always, for those of you guys listening, all the links will be down in the description, but would you mind sharing how people can connect with you more? If they want to learn from you more, where can they go?
Yeah, so as far as social media goes, I'm mainly on Instagram. That's my preferred platform, but I'm on all of the platforms, but I'm like on. I'm really on Instagram. And from there you can also grab links out to my programs, free resources. I have a great 5-day free self-sabotage workshop series you can go through to like learn a lot about this stuff for yourself, but also for your clients. So I'm Coach Kasey Joe on Instagram, where you can find all of that. Shoot me a DM, we can chat. I love connecting with everybody there. If you're interested in the health mindset coaching certification or in KJO coaching, you can find all that information there as well.
Sweet. And all of those links will be down in the description. I was going to crack a joke and I forgot.
Oh, no.
It's the worst. It's, when you're just such a funny person, you have jokes coming in left and right. It's unfortunate. A
It
blessing and a
must have not
curse.
been that good if you forgot it, honestly.
Hey, we barely know each other. You can't be sarcastic. All jokes aside, guys, if you listened to the entire episode, as always, I hope you enjoyed. All I ask is, if you're a regular listener, to rate the podcast and leave a review, and I'll catch you in next week's episode.